sunny day. I don't think there's any threat of like power brownouts or whatever it is. I'm sure some people in this chat would like a brownout, if you know what I mean. Again, I just have issues with my PC. I probably just need a brand new PC, ideally, but I don't think that's going to be happening anytime soon. So we got to make this work. We got to make this shit work. I'm going to figure it out. Wait, am I getting Fs? Fuck, I hope not. What the hell? First question for your serious and important guest has to be Barbie movie. Pro or anti? I'm in the pro camp. I'm in the pro Barbie camp, as I was saying yesterday. I don't think I will see it. I think it's highly unlikely that I will go and see this film, but I'm not like outraged or disgusted by the concept of it, by the idea of it. Are we back? We're not. No, of course we're back. What the hell's going on over here, folks? I've gotten no alerts. I got no alerts or nothing. It says everything's great. Streamlabs is telling me everything's fine. Stream quality good. How is it down? What the fuck? Oh my god, this is making me crazy. I don't know what the fuck's going on over here lately. Well, hopefully this is going to work. When I came to view it, it was down. Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. We get a raid from Lucid. Okay, fuck it. It is interesting timing. It's true. This has been really something else. I had weeks of smooth sailing. And now I don't know what's going on. Is it a Twitch thing? Is it a my computer thing? I don't know. I don't know anymore. Delete program files from your computer to free up RAM. I've heard the best kind of trick in these situations when you're running into computer problems is to delete that old System32 file. That's the one that's always causing the problems. That old System32. You got to get rid of that. Search the C drive with the DLLs and just get rid of those. Just get rid of all those. Sorry, just really curious about the adjust the VCR tracking image. That's my buddy's album cover. Are you talking about like the background of the stream? Is that what you're referring to? That's just, I made that. Okay. Let's see here. I'm just putting out a tweet. I'm just putting out a tweet here to let people know that Dimitri's coming on. Then I'll send him the link, and then we should be good to go. Sorry, I'm really morbidly curious about this. I have to look at this first. Hold on. I'm seeing this tweet and I can't not look at it. And it is a bleached, no, it's not. It's nothing. It's just this. A man on an Asiana Airlines plane was arrested for opening the emergency door while 700 feet in the air before landing. Good Lord. Oh man, that's such a nightmare. That urge to open the emergency door, it's that same primal urge to grab the cop's gun, isn't it? You see the big lever and it seems so enticing, you know, when you're flying around, but you don't do it though. That's the intrusive thought. You can't listen to that intrusive thought. That's really bad. That lever is just so enticing, folks. Don't pull that. Don't pull that lever. It's bad. It's bad news. Oh, crap. Okay. Just give me one moment. I'm going to do a tweet. And we'll get this conversation started. That's closed. Hold on. Don't say anything weird in the chat. I'm just doing a screenshot. Don't say anything about buttholes or whatever it is. Whatever it is you freaks and weirdos are into. I agree, Rob. Bush did 9/11. Well, if you want to really own me, you should do something that I don't already believe in. So, invite link. Okay. Sending that to Dimitri. Good. That's done. Show the Stalin book again. Okay, so Dimitri should be here in just a moment. Just sent it over. Marty, are you still there? What do you think about this? You ever have these? It's not my favorite kind, but it's pretty good. It's pretty refreshing. I got it by accident when stealing. That's good. That's good. No problem, Sean. Sean, look at you. You're out doing stuff lately. What, you think you're better than me? You think you're better than me going out and like, doing stuff? Kind of messed up. Kind of messed up, if you ask me. Okay. Dimitri should be coming here in just a moment. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Dimitri LASCARIS is joining us. Here he is, admitting right now.
Hello?
Hello, Dimitri. Are you there?
Yes.
Hi. How's it going? Do you have
Good. How you doing?
video or?
Yeah, I can turn on my video. Is this just an audio
No. It's
interview or you?
it is video. I can't use my video because my video is being used by the live stream right now. But
Okay.
if you can hear me, everyone can see you in the
Okay.
audience, so you can say
All right.
hello. We're live now. We're live now to
Hey,
a
everybody.
massive audience. It's Dimitri LASCARIS, everybody. Dimitri, thanks for going on. I'm glad we could do this. I had a bit of a tricky time scheduling this. We're crossing the Atlantic here,
My
and
apologies for my screw up, Rob.
no problems. No problem. It happens.
Yeah.
It
Thank you. Thank
happens.
you for your patience.
Yeah. No, we're happy to have you. So Dimitri, you first kind of popped on my radar. I guess it was around 2 years ago when you were running for the Green Party leadership, and I would like to talk to you a bit more about that process maybe later on. But that's when I started kind of following the work that you were doing. I actually joined the Green Party briefly to vote to vote for you for the
Oh, thank you
leadership
so much, Rob.
because
I had no idea. Thank you
yeah,
so much. I appreciate
I'm
that
not like
support.
really super crazy about the Green Party as a sort of political organization, but I liked the idea of having someone in the leadership that maybe had more of a bold vision about where the Green Party should be going, and especially in terms of foreign policy, which we don't hear a lot from the Green Party.
Mhm.
Um, so I've been following your work since that time, and yeah, so I saw that you were.
Can I just interrupt you one thing? I think you and I were you on the Freedom Flotilla in 2018?
No, I was not.
You never participated in the Freedom Flotilla.
No, I've
Okay.
covered these things and talked about them, but no.
I had it in my head that you and I were on a boat at some point, but that must have been some other Rob Russo.
I would like to
But
be on a boat
anyway,
with you. I would be happy to do that in the future at some point, but
I, I hope
um,
we get the chance.
yeah, absolutely. But so I wanted to touch base with you, Dimitri, because I saw that you had just gone on this kind of trip. I saw you spending time in Crimea and Russia. You've been very outspoken about the Russian-Ukraine conflict and Canada's role in kind of like promoting that and prolonging it and expressing a viewpoint that's not exactly very popular in our discourse. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I was just wondering if you could let us know, about this trip you went on, what made you want to go to Crimea and Russia and spend time there, and kind of what your
Mhm.
thoughts are at this time after a year and a half of this conflict going on, and after you've got a chance to spend some time actually in the region, which not a lot of the people that are commenting on this actually have done.
Look, it's not particularly complicated. I mean, one can disagree with my view about all of this, but to understand why I went there, why I have been so focused on this war, so outspoken about this war, all you need to know really is that I think we're living through the most dangerous moment in human history. We are in a hot war with a nuclear armed state. Things never got to this point during the Cuban Missile Crisis. We never got to the point of sending active members of our military and former members of our military who were trained by our military to assist in waging war against Russia or actually participating on the front line in combat against Russian forces. We never got to the point of flooding a country that was on Russia's border with the most lethal weaponry in our arsenals, at least conventional weaponry, and then using our surveillance assets to provide real-time battlefield intelligence to those proxy forces that are using NATO weaponry to assist them to kill Russians and destroy Russian infrastructure and even to launch attacks on Russian soil. It never got to that point. We are well beyond the threshold of danger that we achieved that we arrived at the peak moment of crisis in the Cuban Missile Crisis, in my opinion. And what makes this even more dangerous is that it's happening in the context of a climate crisis that's spinning out of control. The only hope we have to manage that crisis, I mean, at this stage, we're not going to resolve it anytime soon, but at least to get to the point where we can manage it in a way that doesn't undermine organized human civilization, we will need an unprecedented level of international cooperation for that to happen. Something we haven't experienced, certainly not in the post-World War II period. And we're heading in the opposite direction, largely because of this war. We are actually seeing a rapid deterioration in international cooperation. The world is dividing essentially into two blocks, one led by the United States, the other by China and Russia. And I see absolutely no prospect of us dealing responsibly with the climate crisis in the current conditions. My message to you, if you're a climate activist, you're an environmental activist, is you can forget about solving any ecological emergency of a global scale unless we first bring an end to this war. And the way we do that is through negotiation, and we have to have a dialogue with our, the belligerents who are deemed by our elites to be the enemy. We have to engage them in a dialogue, and so that's why I went to Russia. That's why I've been so outspoken about this. This is why I've lost so much sleep over this war. I think we're sleepwalking into World War III, Rob.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about the ways that we're kind of moving away from the idea of international cooperation and forming these kind of separate blocks, I think a lot of people just point to Russia and China as being the reason for that and point to their belligerence and kind of ignore our own role in creating that situation. And I think when you go back to the Russia-Ukraine conflict and you're talking about, Canada or the US's or NATO's role in arming and funding the one side of this war, I think what gets lost a lot of the time in these conversations, especially in the West, you hear this elsewhere around the world, but when we talk about it here, we pretend that our involvement started in 2022, which is not at all accurate, right? Canada and the United States have been arming and funding these militia groups in Eastern Ukraine now for like going on a decade now. And it's been a really kind of inconvenient truth over the last year and a half to acknowledge that. And we like to pretend that this is some kind of like black and white, good versus evil storyline. And we're just pitching in to help the plucky underdog defend themselves. But it's a really kind of like childish and distorted view of the way this has actually developed and the way that we've kind of encouraged this entire situation over the last decade.
Yeah, the superficiality, the shallowness of Western discourse around this war is astonishing, frankly. I mean, it's not just that we were arming those militias, of course. We as in our governments, and particularly the U.S. government, Victoria Nuland, the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine at the time, Jeffrey Pyatt, Senator John McCain, now deceased, and many others from the U.S. political elite, aggressively interfered in Ukrainian politics in 2014 with a view to orchestrating, encouraging, affecting the overthrow of a democratically elected president, Viktor Yanukovych. And whatever one may say about him, Western observers, international election observers, agreed in 2010 that he was democratically elected. And his sin was that he wanted to maintain good relations with Russia. For that, he was deemed by the West to be a Putin puppet. And no one ever talks about the fact that the vast majority of Yanukovych's support in the 2010 election came from the areas of Ukraine where there's a high concentration of Russian speakers and people who are ethnically Russian, and areas which historically, for a good long time, had belonged to Russia. It's not surprising that these people wanted to have good relations with Russia. They shouldn't have been, deprived of their vote, which is effectively what happened when Yanukovych was overthrown. And we've gotten into these silly debates about whether it was a coup or not a coup. I mean, look, at the end of the day, whatever word we attach to it, no rational human being looking at the evidence would say that we did not aggressively interfere in Ukrainian politics at that time. Yeah. And that we were, aggressively seeking to have him replaced by somebody who was a Ukrainian nationalist and hostile to Russia. That's absolutely clear. So, who's the aggressor here at the end of the day? I think that that's a real question that we ought to be debating in an open and transparent manner, rather than trying to shut down dissenting viewpoints, especially when there's so much at stake.
Yeah, and an interesting wrinkle about that as well with Yanukovych that also is not really talked about a lot is like not only was he more neutral, not openly hostile to Russia, but also was in the had turned down a loan from the IMF to go to Russia to get a better deal on cheaper gas coming from Russia, which immediately led to these just a few months later, these widespread protests that led to this pro-EU, pro-NATO, pro-Western replacement. And
Right.
again, that's something that we don't really talk about
No.
in this context.
Nor do we talk about the laws that were adopted by that pro-EU Russophobic regime, which abridged the language rights of Russian speakers in Ukraine. We don't talk about the fact that dozens of pro-Russian activists were burned alive in the trade union building in Odessa in 2014 by neo-Nazi groups and ultranationalists, and that no one was held accountable for that. We don't talk about that at all. So, as I say, our discourse is just extraordinarily shallow, superficial. And I got to tell you, Rob, my greatest disappointment over the past year is to see how few people on the left, people I know to be genuine, sincere leftists and progressives in this country and elsewhere in the West, have been able to summon the courage intellectually and morally to speak out about this war and to see the reality of what is happening. I just, I'm really disappointed. I have to say that. And there have been, a number of honorable people like yourself in the progressive community, who are willing to have an honest and rational discussion about all of this. But there are not enough of us at this particular point in time, and that's frightening.
No, it is. I mean, it's been a really toxic climate for trying to have a nuanced conversation about this. And I understand. I share your disappointment in a lot of this as well. And I think the failure of people on the left to talk about this has opened up space on the right to have these kind of right wing demagogues like Tucker Carlson, for example, making these arguments, which I think are pretty compelling to some people. So I think it's been a huge failure. It's been a huge failure, but it's been a really horrible climate to speak about these things. And to an extent, I understand why people become really reticent to speak out about it, because when you do try to even talk about Russia's perspective in any way, or try to inject any kind of nuance at all, or talk about the role of Canada or the US or NATO in promoting this or prolonging it, I mean, it's just there's this entire kind of propaganda machine that will come after you and target you and call you all sorts of things. They say you support genocide and war crimes and you're a Putinist or whatever it is. And people become really paralyzed, I think, in this kind of really toxic climate where only one viewpoint in our media is really promoted or allowed to be articulated. And anyone that kind of deviates from that is framed as being some kind of radical or extremist. And I kind of understand, even though I do find it a little disappointing, why some people, even if they don't, at the very least, will just say nothing about it because they're worried about how it's going to affect their reputation, how it's going to affect their career prospects. It can be really damaging to have these kind of things floating around out there about you.
Absolutely. I think that's an entirely valid point. I recognize that. When I talk about my disappointment, I'm really not focusing my commentary on the many people within the progressive community who, if they spoke out about it, would be potentially harmed reputationally in terms of their employment whatsoever, whatever it may be, in ways that they themselves are not in a position to manage, to deal with, for so whatever economic reason, they may be confronted by economic constraints, which I'm not subject to. So I'm not referring to those people. I understand why they would be reticent to speak out.
I still do find it disappointing, but it's just,
absolutely. But it's understandable. Well, the people I'm really upset about is, first of all, those people in the progressive community who can withstand the heat and are willing to take that heat in other contexts, for example, defending Palestinian rights or condemning, attempts to overthrow the Venezuelan government, replace it with Juan Guaido, something which fortunately failed. They're willing to stand the heat in those contexts, but not in this context. And even worse, the people I'm really worked up about, to be frank about it, are the people who join in the reputational destruction. They actually will come after you on social media, and they'll call you a Putin. People who used to support me are doing that. And I'm astonished by this. I mean, okay, you don't want to speak out. You don't want to take the heat. I get it. But do you have to make yourself a useful idiot of the Anglo-American Empire by coming after people like myself or yourself who are trying to speak some truth about this thing? Like, that's just unacceptable.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, you know, I think it's just kind of, it should be sort of a basic thing on the, if you're on, count yourself to be on the left, to kind of understand what NATO is and what NATO is doing, and to kind of be against that and to push back against it and to push back against these narratives. And the idea of all these kind of like leftists and socialists who are not only not speaking out, like I was talking about, but openly promoting NATO and supporting it and saying, oh yeah, we need to, NATO is getting it right this one time, you know, we got to back them on this. You know, that to me is pretty bad. It's pretty unacceptable.
I've said this many times, you know, if we can agree on one thing, we on the left, we in the progressive community, we anti-imperialists, it should be that NATO doesn't give a damn about international law or human rights or democracy. They don't even care about those things in their own part of the world, let alone in other parts of the world outside of the NATO jurisdictions. I mean, we've seen this over and over again. Did they care about international law in Iraq? Did they care about it in Libya? Did they care about it in Afghanistan? I mean, when they overthrew the government of Mohammad Mossadegh in the 1950s, NATO powers, democratically elected president of Iran, did they care about democracy, international law in Chile when Salvador Allende was overthrown? The record of lawlessness and anti-democratic behavior and abuses of human rights of NATO powers is so long that you have to truly live in la la land to think that this war or any war supported by NATO has anything to do with democracy, international law, and human rights. We should at least be able to agree on that much. And if we do agree on that, then the question becomes, what are they really up to over there? What is NATO's real agenda? That's the conversation we should be having. We shouldn't be debating whether or not this is nobly or honorably motivated, because clearly it's not. I mean, you really have to be out to lunch to believe that at this stage. How many times does NATO have to lie to us, the United States government, the Canadian government, about its true foreign policy objectives before we stop believing them?
Yeah, I mean, not only lying to us and engaging in this kind of behavior, but specifically arming and funding proxies in civil wars to destabilize regimes that you don't like. This strategy has been going on for decades. And in the last 10, 15 years in Libya, they've done that. In Syria, and they're then doing it in Ukraine with these proxies there. So it's like, I guess that's where I get a little confused, where I see people just unable to recognize this basic pattern, this strategy of arming and funding these proxies, promoting these conflicts, and then destabilizing regimes with in an effort to get rid of these regimes that you don't like. I mean, this is not a new strategy for NATO, but again, people just have been really confused by this whole thing, and the inability to recognize this, I think, has been strange for me over the last year and a half.
Yeah, that, you know, and the great tragedy of all of this, assuming we manage to avoid a nuclear war, and by this stage, I think all bets are off on that front. We could very well find ourselves in a nuclear war the way things are going. But in the least awful scenario, Ukraine will end up destroyed. Ukraine's being destroyed before our very eyes. And anyone who thinks that NATO is going to pick up the pieces when this country is left in smoking ruins, did they do that in Afghanistan? Did they stay there and rebuild the country that they destroyed? Did they do that in Libya? Are they going to do that in Syria? Did they do that in Iraq? They're going to leave that country in smoking ruins, and it's going to be, first and foremost, an absolute tragedy for this generation and subsequent generations of Ukrainians. But also that devastation will be an open, festering wound in the heart of Europe for decades to come. A country that has been flooded with weapons, where neo-Nazis have been encouraged to be armed and to wage war, where democracy has basically been torn apart. There's no democracy left in Ukraine anymore. Anybody who looks at the actual behavior of the Zelensky government, I mean, you have to be on planet Mars to think that that's a democratic champion. They've shut down all opposition parties. They've adopted laws, vague, ambiguous laws, which subject people to imprisonment for over a decade because they express sympathy for Russia. They've shut down opposition newspapers, television stations. And there's evidence of massive corruption, grand larceny on an epic scale going on right now in Ukraine. And so this is not a democratic government. It is not ultimately serving the interests of the Ukrainian people, and they are going to be the people we're supposed to be helping are the ones who are going to suffer the most because of Western policies towards this war.
Yeah, and these sort of like economic, like the shock doctrine style economic policies are already put into place. So whatever form Ukraine takes afterwards, like this process of like privatization, whatever social safety net was still left over from the Soviet era, that's been dismantled. All sort of remotely left-wing parties. It's just totally primed for this like Western capital penetration, which again is great for the shareholders and stockholders of these corporations that are going to move in there and privatize all the resources and all these like social services. But it's going to be, as it's been everywhere else around the world with this process taking place, it's going to be horrible for the people that actually have to live in this situation.
Yeah. It's just heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking what's being done to that country.
It is. Yeah. We're
in it up to our necks.
Yeah. And the main people that are so gung-ho about prolonging this have this idea that they're doing it because in the defense of of Ukrainians, when in the reality they're making life worse for the people that actually have to live in that region. That's been a really weird thing for me, seeing people in like Canada and America become so kind of hyped up by this fog of war situation and getting so attached to these like regions in eastern Ukraine and villages that they didn't hear of before weeks and months previous to this. And it's like they feel like they have more of an attachment to these places than the actual people that are living through this situation that didn't have to go through this. It's been very bizarre.
Yeah. Yeah. And one question I like to ask is, when I hear people, particularly progressives and leftists, saying I support the arming of Ukraine, do they support sending weapons to the Palestinians to kill Israeli soldiers? I have yet to meet a single leftist or progressive who supports the arming of Ukrainians and who will say publicly or even privately that they support sending weapons to the Palestinians to kill Israeli soldiers. And the mainstream human rights community in the West now acknowledges openly that Israel is an apartheid state. And our government and almost all Western governments for decades have acknowledged that the settlements in the West Bank are a violation of the Fourth Geneva Convention, and that Israel is engaged in a range of human rights abuses. It's been going on not for a year and a half, as in the case of the invasion of Ukraine. This has been going on for decades, Rob. Decades. Yeah. Yet no one who supports the arming of Ukrainians will say, I support sending weapons to the Palestinians to kill Israeli soldiers, the occupying soldiers. No one.
Yeah. Well, Even if you are against the invasion and you want to talk about the right of Ukrainians under international law, either the moral or the legal right to defend themselves in this case, then if that's what you believe, and I understand that argument, but if that's what you believe, then on that same level, then the Palestinians do not only have the moral right, but the legal right to defend themselves with armed struggle. But as you're pointing out, the same people are not quite as interested in extending this right to the Palestinians. You talked about, we talked a little bit of the people that actually have to live in these regions. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to connect with you, because you just recently went to Crimea. That's kind of a big part of this story as well, because after the Euromaidan, you had the Russian annexation of Crimea. And in some of the conversations about ending this Ukrainian conflict, you have this kind of very hardline stance coming from the West saying, like, not only does Russia need to fully leave these eastern regions and immediately withdraw from there, but also Crimea as well. Which, again, I think is a little bit strange, and it's not always really like keeping in mind like what the actual people that live in this region think as well. And as we've talked about it before on this stream, and I would like to hear your thoughts on this, but there's plenty of people in Crimea that are actually quite comfortable with the current situation, that don't want to go back to being part of Ukraine. And we don't really want to hear from these people when we talk about this narrative, like in our media. Do you want to just talk about what your experience was visiting Crimea and actually speaking to some of the people there, and how you think that contrasts with how we talk about this conflict and talk about Crimea and Russia's role there?
Sure. So I was just, just to put it all in context, I was there for about 11 days in April. I probably spoke to dozens of people when I was there, no more than that. I didn't conduct any kind of a poll, obviously. I was pretty much all over Crimea during those 11 days. I went to Yalta, in the southeastern part of the peninsula. I was in Sevastopol, which is in the southwestern part, and which is the headquarters of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. I was in the capital, Simferopol of Crimea, which is kind of in the middle. And then I went to the north to the border with Kherson region, and between Crimea and Kherson region, right at the border, and visited a refugee center where people coming from Kherson and other parts of the war zone were being transited out to other areas, refugees, where they could be dealt with